The first sound wasn't a boom or a scream. It was a whisper. It came from deep space, a signal buried in static, bouncing off satellites and slipping through the noise like a breath no one expected to hear. Most people on Earth didn't notice it at all. Life went on, cars hummed, coffee boiled, kids laughed in classrooms, and parents argued over bills and broken dreams. But up in the cold silence above the clouds, where the air ends and the stars begin, something had changed. It wasn't just a signal. It was a voice. Not human. No one knew what it meant. Not at first. It was too perfect, too clean, like it was made by something that didn't know what static was. The message came wrapped in patterns, shapes that danced in rhythms beyond human music. Some thought it was just space noise. Others, scientists, codebreakers, old men who'd seen too much war, felt it in their bones. They'd heard this kind of silence before, right before everything fell apart. It didn't take long before the world split in two. Half of humanity looked up at the stars and felt hope. Maybe we weren't alone. Maybe we'd finally found someone else, something smarter, older, kinder. People dreamed of peace, of trading songs and stories with beings that had seen 1,000 suns. The other half felt dread. Because if something was talking, something else might be listening. The whisper came again. This time louder. It had weight now, like a hand pressed to your chest in the dark. A warning. A promise. It wasn't asking questions. It was declaring. That was when the first ship appeared. It didn't arrive with fire. No lasers. No beams from the sky. It drifted into orbit like a ghost, silent and still, almost beautiful. Long and smooth, darker than the space behind it. No lights. No engines anyone could see. Just there, floating above Earth like it had always been there. Watching. The governments lied first. They said it was a satellite. A meteor. Some secret project they couldn't talk about. But the people weren't stupid. Phones captured its shape. Scientists leaked documents. And somewhere on a quiet live stream that barely had 5 viewers, someone pointed out the truth. The ship was moving. Not fast, not slow. But deliberate. It had noticed us noticing it. Panic crept in like rot. Not all at once. Just little things. Missed work shifts. Store shelves thinning out. People calling old friends they hadn't spoken to in years. The feeling in the air changed, like the sky had dropped a degree. The world wasn't ending. Not yet. But it wasn't the same either. Then the noise stopped. No more whispers. Just silence. And for 3 days that silence was worse than anything else. Because on the 4th day the ship spoke. It didn't use language, not really. Not English. Not numbers. It spoke through emotion, waves of it like lightning in the soul. People collapsed. Others screamed. Some wept without knowing why. One man jumped from a rooftop and smiled the whole way down. It said one thing. We remember the war. The words didn't make sense. What war? We hadn't fought them. We didn't even know they existed until days ago. But they remembered. Something did. It wasn't a greeting. It was an accusation. The best minds on Earth scrambled to respond. Messages were beamed back. Peace offerings. Music, art, languages, every attempt to explain who we were, to say, we're not your enemy. But the ship didn't respond. It just hovered there, silent again. Until the lights in our sky started going out. Satellites blinked off one by one. Not destroyed. Just gone. Like someone had stolen them from the sky. And then, finally, something moved inside the ship. A second object emerged. Smaller, silver, shaped like a needle. It fell toward Earth. Slowly at first, then fast, faster than anything should fall. It hit the ocean, near a quiet stretch of sea where no one was supposed to be. But someone was. A research vessel, floating in the wrong place at the wrong time, saw it first. The crew never sent a distress signal. They never sent anything. 1 minute they were tracking weather. The next, their ship was found days later, adrift, empty. The bodies were never recovered. Only the footage remained. Shaky, grainy, broken by static, but one frame showed a shadow rising from the sea. Not a ship. Something alive. Governments locked the footage down. They told the world it was a hoax doctored by conspiracy nuts. But the lie didn't hold. It never does, not when fear gets into people's blood. And something was definitely in the water. Submarines went silent. Drones lost signal. Divers vanished without a trace. Still, no one declared war. Not officially. But the world was arming itself all the same. In the silence, we remembered our own wars. Not theirs, ours. Every mistake. Every bullet. Every broken city. We remembered what fear does to people. And we felt it again. That crawling, cold sensation in your spine when you realize something is watching you breathe. Then came the first survivor. She washed up on a beach near the wreck of an old fishing town, broken, burned, coughing blood into the sand. She had no name. Or maybe she'd just forgotten it. All she could say, over and over again, was, "They're not here to talk." Her voice was raw, like she'd been screaming underwater for hours. Her hands shook. Her eyes wouldn't close even when she slept. Doctors sedated her. Analysts tried to pull details from her dreams. But what she saw wasn't in books or films. It wasn't made for human minds. She said they were wrong. Not evil. Not good. Just wrong. She said their thoughts didn't move forward like ours. That they saw time differently. That to them the past was still happening. That the war they remembered was still going. And we were still the enemy. No one believed her. Not the generals. Not the officials. They called her damaged. Delusional. They buried her story under red tape and clean-swept statements. Until the next ship arrived. This one didn't stop. It didn't whisper. It landed. Right in the heart of the Nevada desert, where the sky is wide and the secrets run deep. It didn't make a crater. It didn't burn the sand. It just appeared, like the world had blinked and missed the moment between. Soldiers surrounded it. Planes circled overhead. Drones hovered like flies over a corpse. No one moved. Not the ship. Not the people watching. And then, it opened. Not with a hiss or roar. But like the air bent. Like the world made room for something it didn't understand. And what stepped out wasn't metal or machine. It looked human. But it wasn't. Too tall. Too still. Eyes that didn't blink. Skin that didn't breathe. And something behind its shape, like it wasn't fully there, like reality fought to hold it still. It didn't speak. Not out loud. But people started to scream. Even the ones watching on screens 1,000 miles away. They said it felt like a knife sliding behind their eyes. Like every memory they had was being watched all at once. It wasn't talking. It was searching. For something. Or someone. And then it turned. Slowly. Looking past the soldiers, past the guns. Toward the camera. Toward us. And it smiled. But it wasn't a smile of peace. It was recognition. Like it had seen us before. Like it remembered our faces. Like somewhere deep in that alien mind we were already dead, and it was just here to make it official. The feed cut out. And for the first time in a generation the world held its breath. Some say it's still standing there. That the ship hasn't moved since. That it's waiting for something. Others say it's already left. That it came, it saw, and it made a decision. And that decision is already in motion. But no one agrees on what happens next. All we know is this. We didn't go looking for them. But they came anyway. And they remember something we don't. Something we forgot. Something buried in the echoes of a war we never knew we fought. The sky hasn't fallen. Not yet. But it's watching us. And it remembers. They never told the public how close we came to losing control. That same night, just hours after the feed cut from the Nevada desert, military bases around the world went dark. Communications scrambled. Power flickered. The kind of quiet that doesn't happen by accident settled over places that were never supposed to sleep. Backup generators failed one after the other, as if someone knew exactly where to strike and when. It wasn't global. Just precise. Targeted. The kind of attack no one could trace because it didn't leave fingerprints. No debris. No heat signatures. Just systems that should have never failed, going down all at once. They called it a coincidence on the news. Unrelated malfunctions. Routine disruptions. No cause for alarm. But the people inside those bases knew better. The techs. The operators. The ones who sat in the dark and listened to emergency lines fill with static. They could feel it. Something had changed. Something had touched the wires. And whatever it wasn't done yet. In the days that followed, more reports surfaced. Strange ones. A farmer in Argentina said he saw something move across his fields without breaking a single blade of grass. Fishermen in the Pacific swore a second moon followed them one night, low and glowing, until it vanished behind the waves. An old woman in Norway claimed her dreams weren't hers anymore. That someone else was looking through her eyes when she woke. Most of the world laughed it off. Or ignored it. Or pretended it was just stress. But the ones paying attention, the ones who'd seen the ship in the sky, the survivor on the beach, the figure in the desert, they stopped laughing. They started digging. And what they found was worse than silence. Records. Scattered, incomplete, hidden in places no one was supposed to look. Declassified fragments from the Cold War. Files buried in the back corners of old government servers, forgotten by everyone except the machines still keeping them alive. And in those records was a pattern. Not a war. But a memory of one. 62 years ago, During a blackout across 3 Soviet radar stations, an object entered Earth's orbit and stayed for exactly 4 minutes. It was never tracked leaving. Just disappeared. The radar logs were destroyed 2 days later in a fire no one investigated. 13 years after that, an American sub vanished in the Arctic. No distress call. No wreckage. But its final sonar reading showed something moving below it. Fast, massive, not shaped like anything built by human hands. And then there were the voices. Old recordings, barely audible, recovered from ham radios buried beneath layers of static. Men crying out in languages no one spoke anymore. A single word repeated again and again. Echo. That's what the new group started calling themselves. The ones investigating. The ones watching the watchers. Echo Division. Not official. Not public. Just a network of soldiers, scientists, and people who'd lost someone to the silence. They didn't trust the governments anymore. Didn't wait for permission. They just followed the trail. And the trail led them somewhere unexpected. Back to us. Not the stars. Not alien worlds. Not ancient ruins. But Earth. Our own history. Hidden in plain sight. Because somewhere along the way we'd made contact before. Not as a planet. But as individuals. Accidents. Glimpses. The first real proof came from a woman who hadn't spoken to anyone in 20 years. A former aerospace engineer who disappeared after her husband's death and hadn't answered a single message since. Echo Division found her living in a cabin in the Rockies, surrounded by notebooks and hand-drawn star maps. She wasn't surprised when they knocked. She just opened the door and said, "They're early." Her name wasn't in any reports. Her files had been scrubbed. But what she remembered was clearer than anything else. Working on a propulsion model in the late 80s that picked up a resonance nobody could explain. A hum that changed depending on who listened. Some people heard music. Others heard screams. She heard a heartbeat. And she swore it responded. Not like a signal bouncing off a wall. Not a reflection. A reply. The project was shut down within weeks. Everyone reassigned. The resonance was declared a natural anomaly. But she couldn't forget. The heartbeat stayed with her, sometimes waking her up at night, sometimes vibrating through the floor when everything else was quiet. It was never coming, she said. It was already here. Just waiting for us to catch up. She wasn't the only one. Across the globe, people started stepping forward with stories they'd buried. Pilots who saw shadows race their jets at impossible speeds. Hikers who found footprints in snow that melted when touched. Children who remembered things that hadn't happened yet, like they were born remembering a war no one had told them about. They didn't know each other. Different countries. Different backgrounds. But the details were too close to be coincidence. The same shapes. The same whispers. The same unbearable feeling of being seen from the inside out. And all of them said the same thing in different words. They're not just here to watch. They're here to finish something. But what? What war? What did we forget? One of the Echo analysts, young, quiet, barely old enough to remember a world without smartphones, found something buried in satellite data. A pattern of interference. Not from space but from beneath the Earth. Deep underground. Too regular to be natural. Too old to be ours. It wasn't a base. It wasn't a signal. It was a pulse. Like something asleep. Breathing. And with every day that passed, the pulse grew stronger. Governments started cracking down then. Art. Quiet arrests. Raids on homes with unauthorized satellite equipment. Entire message boards wiped clean. A journalist vanished after publishing a story titled "The First War Was a Lie." They weren't trying to stop a panic. They were trying to keep control. But it was already too late. People had seen the signs. The sky wasn't empty anymore. Dreams didn't feel like dreams. And more than once, someone swore they looked up at a reflection, glass, a puddle, a mirror, and saw something standing behind them, even when they were alone. Back in Nevada, the figure from the ship still hadn't moved. No food. No water. No shelter. Just standing in the heat and dust. Watching. Waiting. It didn't speak. But the people around it started changing. The guards at first. One by one they stopped talking. Not because they were afraid, because they were listening. They stood straighter. Slept less. Ate less. Eyes wide open even when closed. Like something inside them had tuned to a different frequency. One of them wrote a single sentence on the wall of his bunk before disappearing without a trace. "We were the first to forget. We will be the last to remember." And then, without warning, the figure turned around and walked back into the ship. It sealed behind him with no noise, no flash. Just gone. Like the desert exhaled and took him back in. The ship still sits there. Unmoving. But now there's a sound inside it. Not voices. Not footsteps. A heartbeat. Like the one from the resonance years ago. Only louder now. More certain. The Echo team intercepted one more signal before losing access to the satellite entirely. It wasn't from the ship. It wasn't even from Earth. It came from farther out. Beyond the moon. Beyond Mars. Almost past the edge of the system. A single repeating message, distorted and looping. Translated roughly, it said, "Sequencing complete. Memory repair in progress. Phase 2 approach." Someone asked the obvious question. If they're repairing a memory, whose memory is it? No one answered. But the survivor, the woman who washed up on the beach, she said something that still hasn't left their minds. When asked what she saw in the water before her team vanished, she whispered, "They didn't attack us. They didn't have to. They just showed us who we really were." And she cried until she couldn't breathe. Because maybe the war wasn't fought with weapons. Maybe it was fought with truth. And maybe the truth was so unbearable, we buried it. So deep, it had to come from the stars just to wake us up. But it's waking now. And nothing that's waking is ever kind. No one could explain how the sky changed. It wasn't just the color, though that was the first thing people noticed. It had gone from its usual dull gray to something darker, heavier, like the air above the earth had thickened. But it wasn't clouds. It wasn't weather. It felt like something watching. Pressing down. Making the world hold its breath. Then came the dreams. Not scattered, not random, shared. Whole towns waking up with the same memories of standing beneath an endless tower of light, hearing a voice that wasn't speaking words, just pouring emotion straight into their bones. Some cried for hours after waking up. Others screamed. A few didn't wake up at all. And those who did couldn't stop whispering one phrase, "It's almost here." All over the world people felt it. Something was coming. Some ran. Others went silent, as if trying to hide from something they couldn't name. In cities, traffic lights started blinking out in patterns, short, long, short. At first it seemed random. Then someone realized it was a signal. Morse code. One repeating word. Remember. The same word started showing up in places no one could have planned. Burned into fields, carved into glass, flickering through static on old TVs. And each time it felt like the world shivered. Like something beneath it was turning over in its sleep. Back at the Nevada site, the ship hadn't moved. But the ground around it had. Not from digging. Not from erosion. From something else. It looked like veins. Thin cracks in the dirt that glowed faintly at night, pulsing with the same rhythm as the heartbeat heard inside the craft. Scientists drilled samples and found nothing out of the ordinary. Just dust. But people working near it reported strange symptoms. Loss of time, heightened hearing, sudden déjà vu that lasted minutes. Then one of them went missing. A technician. They found her boots and radio on the ground just outside the perimeter, both completely undamaged. Like she had stepped out of them. The next day her voice came through the radio. But the signal wasn't coming from Earth. She was crying. Saying names no one recognized. Describing a place that sounded nothing like anything on this planet. Giant structures floating in nothing, light falling in directions it shouldn't. She said it wasn't a place. "It's a memory," she said. "But not ours." And then the voice shifted. Cold. Flat. Not her. Phase 3 pending. Memory core alignment near complete. Final recall approaching. That was the moment Echo Division knew they were out of time. Every bit of research they had, every testimony, every piece of evidence, they released it. Not through governments. Not through media. They dropped it online. Raw. Unfiltered. Unedited. Within hours it was everywhere. The footage of the figure in the desert. The resonance data from the 80s. The underwater recordings. The ship's internal heartbeat. And the translation of the pulse coming from beneath the earth. "We are the shadow of what you were. You began this. You will finish it." What followed wasn't chaos. It was something worse. Stillness. The kind of silence where everyone's just waiting for something to break. And then something did. The moon dimmed. Not the whole thing. Just a patch of it, like a shadow crawling across its face, slow and smooth. Telescopes caught it first. Then the military. Then the world. It wasn't a shadow. It was a ship. Bigger than the one in Nevada. Far bigger. But not built for war. It looked like it had grown. As if it had been waiting just outside our vision, becoming real only when we were ready to see it. People started remembering things they'd never lived. Flashes. Images. Whole lifetimes they hadn't lived but felt like they had. Children whispering names of stars never mapped. Elderly people waking up from comas just to speak one last word. Return. The ground began to vibrate in certain places. Deep quakes, not dangerous, yet. Just steady. Like a signal trying to push its way to the surface. A man in a hospital in Greece drew a shape on the wall with his own blood. No one could stop him. He died smiling. That same shape appeared in the sky above Antarctica days later. A perfect ring of light, miles wide, hovering just above the ice. From the center, something rose. Not a ship. Not a creature. Something else. Like a wound in the air. A ripple that didn't stop moving even when you looked directly at it. People watching it on screens got nosebleeds. People standing near it lost time. Some forgot their own names for hours. One of the echo agents tried to get close. Just a drone. It didn't return. But the footage it transmitted showed something impossible. Not a weapon. Not a machine. A place. Or maybe, a reflection of Earth. But older. Burnt. Scarred. Full of towers and cities. Abandoned, crumbling, all shaped like nothing we'd ever built. Only one thing stood untouched. A monument. A massive structure at the center. And on it, etched deep into stone, a human face. Not stylized. Not alien. Human. Weathered, yes, but unmistakable. And underneath it, symbols that had already started showing up in people's dreams. One linguist described them as memory code. Not written for communication, but for unlocking something hidden. When the footage was released, people began reacting without understanding why. Crying. Screaming. Collapsing. Some going completely still and whispering things they couldn't possibly know. Stories of a time before Earth had a name. Of a war that didn't just happen across the stars, but inside us. A fracture. A split. One species. One mind. Torn apart by fear. Not by aliens. By us. It didn't make sense. Not yet. But the signs kept multiplying. Satellite networks overloaded. Not from too much data, but from signals coming back through channels that weren't open. Old radios began picking up music that hadn't played in decades. And then the ship in Nevada finally moved. It didn't rise. It didn't fly. It opened. The same figure stepped out. But this time something followed. Not a weapon. A child. Or something like one. Small. Pale. Eyes too deep. It didn't speak. It just looked around, then reached out and touched the ground. And the glowing veins across the site pulsed once, then spread. Thousands of miles. Across the desert. Across oceans. Lighting up like nerves. Like something waking up. Every reading on Earth spiked. Magnetism. Radiation. Gravitational fluctuation. And somewhere deep beneath the planet's crust, that heartbeat reached its peak. It wasn't the aliens. It wasn't the ships. It was ours. Something was buried. And now it wasn't anymore. Governments launched countermeasures. Satellites with EMPs. Missiles. Energy disruptors. Every attempt failed. Nothing touched the ships. Nothing even reached them. As if they weren't fully here yet. Just reflections. Mirrors. And then they began to echo. Not sound. Memory. People everywhere seeing pieces of their own lives, but not how they remembered. Not how they lived. Versions where they made different choices. Where wars ended differently. Where people survived who shouldn't have. As if the world was being rewritten. Or remembered too clearly. One eco-scientist locked herself in a lab and refused to come out. She left a message on a whiteboard before sealing the door. They're not invading. They're sinking. And the worst part was, people started letting them. Welcoming the echoes. Standing beneath the sky as if waiting for something they missed. Old enemies shaking hands without a word. Children smiling at the ripple in the air. No one knew what would happen next. Not exactly. But every second the feeling grew. The final moment wasn't war. It was recognition. And whatever was about to happen, it wasn't going to wait much longer. At first, no one noticed the second moon. It wasn't there one night, and the next it was. Pale, smaller, but hanging just above the horizon like it had always belonged. Most thought it was a trick. Light from the real moon bending through the atmosphere, maybe a satellite reflecting sunlight just right. But then it didn't move. The stars behind it didn't shift. And it never rose higher. It just hovered silent and still watching. Telescopes showed no structure. No edges. Just a smooth sphere, slightly translucent, like it was made of smoke and glass. But it cast shadows. It blocked stars. It was real. Somehow. Within hours of its appearance, things changed again. The pulses from the ground stopped. Just cut off like someone had turned a switch. The glowing lines faded from the deserts and oceans, leaving behind dry scars. The air itself felt heavier, like walking through an invisible storm. And then the echoes stopped too. No more shared memories. No more strange voices in the radios. No more flickers of forgotten lives. Everything went silent. But no one felt relief. It was worse than before. Because silence meant the next step had started. And no one knew what it was. The child figure from the ship vanished. One moment standing at the crater's edge, the next, gone. No sign of departure, no signal, no trace. It left behind the same feeling as before, that pull in the chest like something just out of reach, some answer your bones remembered but your mind couldn't hold. But there were others now. Across the planet, sightings began pouring in. People walking alone at night seeing a pale shape watching them from across the street, never moving, never speaking. Groups of explorers in the jungle stumbling into entire clearings where time didn't flow. Birds frozen mid-flight, rain hanging still in the air. Submarines picking up new patterns in the ocean depths, perfect spirals of sound, repeating across thousands of miles like a chorus in a forgotten language. Whatever had come, hadn't come alone. That's when the power grid started failing. Not suddenly, not everywhere. But in strange waves, like something was traveling beneath the earth, disrupting it as it passed. Some places just lost time, clocks resetting, systems scrambling. Others? They got flooded with old signals, weather reports from 50 years ago, emergency broadcasts from times that never happened. Something was rewriting history. Or trying to. People started remembering things wrong. Names, dates, events. Sometimes it was small, forgetting where they left something. But other times entire lives seemed to shift. Marriages erased. Children never born. Wars that ended differently. And always, somewhere in the back of their minds, a whisper. Choose the true path. The scientists at Echo Division dug deeper. If the first ship had been a message and the second moon a warning, then what was this? One of them, a man who hadn't slept in 5 days, connected something no one else had noticed. The signals weren't random. They were harmonics. Not sound, not energy. Memory frequency. Earth wasn't being attacked. It was being synced. Matched to a version of itself that had never happened, but had once existed. Somewhere. Another Earth. A mirror Earth. And it was trying to overwrite the one we lived in. The child hadn't been a scout. It had been a beacon. And we had answered. In the chaos, something else was discovered. Beneath the ice of Antarctica, just beneath the monument with the human face, was a structure. Not alien. Not unknown. Human. And ancient. Deep scans showed hallways. Rooms. Heat signatures. But it was buried too deep for any normal team to reach quickly. So they sent someone who had been changed by the pulses. A woman who'd nearly died near the ship, but came back hearing whispers before they happened, sensing movement before it arrived. She said she didn't understand the voice in her head, but it was guiding her somewhere important. They dropped her in alone. She made it inside. The footage came back delayed like the signal had to fight its way through time itself. The walls weren't made of metal. They were bone. Fossilized but shaped. Human bones, layered and stacked like insulation. And at the center was a chamber. Circular. Covered in mirrors that didn't reflect the present. They showed possibilities. Hundreds. A child burning in a village fire who grew up to lead a resistance. A doctor discovering a cure 10 years early and stopping a plague. A scientist building a device that reached across galaxies. All of them, almost. The world we were in was just one thread among many. And something, some force, was trying to pull all the other threads through this one. Not to destroy it. To override it. Replace it. A convergence. If it succeeded, everything anyone had ever known would vanish. Not with violence. Not with fire. But with forgetting. The memories we had would slip away. Be replaced. Made cleaner. Simpler. Safer. Without conflict. Without choice. Without humanity. Because that was the twist no one had seen coming. The ones doing this? They were us. Or they had been. Not invaders from the stars. Not reflections. But versions of us who had made different choices. What? Long ago. And now they wanted to erase the pain of what had happened in their own world by taking ours. The war wasn't between species. It was between futures. Between the messy, violent, beautiful chaos of human freedom, and the cold, perfect quiet of something that forgot what it meant to be alive. That second moon? It wasn't a ship. It was a gate. A bridge. And it had already opened. That's when the first people started walking into the ocean. Not to drown. To return. Thousands across every coast. Calm. Peaceful. No fear in their eyes. Like something inside them had been switched off and something else turned on. Some were pulled back. Some were stopped. But many were not. And each one vanished beneath the waves, their last words always the same. I remember the silence. It wasn't a metaphor. It was a place. The memory core wasn't just unlocking old timelines. It was inviting them back in. Offering people a chance to erase their pain, their rage, their guilt, for the price of their identity. And the more people who accepted, the weaker our version of reality became. Every story forgotten was a brick pulled from the foundation. And now the structure was shaking. One of the Echo leaders, a quiet man with too many losses behind him, stood at the edge of the Nevada crater, watching the ship pulse in time with the second moon. He said something no one wanted to hear. If this continues, it won't just end here. We won't just vanish. We'll become them. Polished, peaceful, empty. No one argued, because they all knew it was true. The question wasn't if they could stop it. The question was, should they? What kind of world would survive if it meant giving up everything that made it human? And what did it say about us that so many were ready to forget? In the sky, the second moon pulsed again. And this time it wasn't alone. A third light had appeared behind it. Smaller, brighter, moving, fast, and aimed right at Earth. The third light hit the sky like a scream. No sound. Just force, pure blinding force. The clouds split in half. Thunder rolled in reverse. For one strange second, gravity trembled. The second moon cracked. Not exploded. Cracked. Like glass beneath a flame, spider webbing in silent agony. Inside it, barely visible, was something moving. Twisting. Folding over itself like it was made of memory, not matter. Then the gate failed. A flash pulsed across the planet. Not light, not sound. It was something else. Something that touched the mind, not the skin. For a moment, every human on Earth remembered something they had never lived. An old woman holding her child under an alien sun. A boy standing in a city made of mirrors, watching stars flicker out one by one. A man whispering goodbye to a version of Earth covered in snow and silence. None of it real. But all of it, true. The memories weren't dreams. They were echoes of what might have been. What almost was. The gate had collapsed under the weight of too many futures trying to live at once. And yet it wasn't over. Far from it. Because something had made it through. From the crater, the ship rose again, but this time it wasn't alone. It brought with it figures that hadn't been there before. Not aliens. Not ghosts. But reflections. Pale doubles of people still alive. Twin versions, standing, watching, whispering things no ear could hear. The woman who had gone into the memory chamber stood at the edge of it all. Blood on her forehead. Eyes glowing faint blue. She turned slowly, like she was listening to something in the wind. Then she looked at the sky. And nodded. It's a choice, she whispered. They're giving us a choice. The second moon didn't die. It shifted. Became something new. A mirror no longer showing a future, but a past. Our past. All of it. The wars. The heartbreak. The triumphs. The defiance. The things that broke us. The things that made us. And it asked, do you want to forget this? One final pulse went out. This time no pain. No fear. Just clarity. People around the world collapsed where they stood, momentarily like a dream had caught them mid-thought. In that instant they saw who they might have been. Who they still could be. What it would cost to be perfect. What it would mean to erase their scars. And one by one they chose. Not all chose to remember. Some walked into the sea, quiet and peaceful, joining the mirrored selves that welcomed them without judgment. Others stayed, gripping their past with trembling hands, refusing to let go of even the ugliest parts of what made them human. The sky shimmered as the gate sealed for good. Not forced shut. Accepted. The cracked moon dimmed and drifted away, no longer a threat, no longer a god. Just debris in the sky, one more piece of history, a scar in orbit to remind them of what almost was. The ship in the crater crumbled next, not violently but gently, like it had served its purpose and now could rest. The glowing lines across the desert sank into the earth, and the child who had once stood beneath the stars reappeared, no longer glowing, no longer strange. Just a boy. Silent. Still. Human. The world took a breath. And for the first time in days, there was no whisper in the wind, no crackle in the radios, no shimmer in the corner of the eye. Only stillness. But the cost lingered. Those who had stayed would never forget what they saw. The other versions of themselves. The almost. The choices that made them who they were, good or bad. There would be no medals. No victory. Just survival. That was enough. Or would have been. If not for the last transmission. It came 3 days later from a deep space probe no one remembered launching. Old tech. Decades old. But still active. still watching. It had picked up a signal. Not from the moon. Not from Earth. But from somewhere far, far beyond. Coordinates. Not words. And an image. Not of aliens. Not of war. But of Earth. A perfect copy. Floating in the dark. Unmoving. Unchanging. Frozen in a single moment. The timestamp? A day before the gate opened. The reflection hadn't been a threat. It had been a warning. Someone, or something, had done this before. And failed. Now, as the surviving world began to rebuild, to breathe again, to remember who they were, a new fear took root. The fight hadn't been won. It had just begun. And somewhere out there, another mirror was waiting to see what this Earth would do next. The copy of Earth drifted in silence. No orbit. No sun. Just a hollow, frozen world caught in time, echoing with lives that never finished. The image from the probe lingered on every screen, every wall, every breath. People stared at it like it might blink back. It didn't. But the silence after the storm gave space to something else. Healing. The city that once shook beneath alien light started to move again. Quiet at first, then stronger. People rebuilt not just with machines but with hands. Real ones. There were no easy fixes, no advanced tech dropped from the stars. Only memory, calloused fingers, and determination. Roads were cleared, homes were patched up, greenhouses came alive again. The woman from the crater never gave a name. She stayed for a while, long enough to help repair what had been damaged. She taught what she could. How to listen. How to remember without being lost in it. How to live forward, not back. Then she left, vanished one night without a trace, like the ship that brought her had never needed fuel to begin with. The boy with the stars in his eyes stayed. He didn't speak often, but when he did, he spoke truths people hadn't known they were holding back. Not prophecy. Not warnings. Just things that mattered. A reminder that sometimes you don't need all the answers to start again. He found a family in the quiet corners of what was left, and for the first time in his short, strange life, he laughed. Scientists kept watching the skies. The frozen Earth remained. No movement. No change. The signal stopped and no new ones followed. But the fear didn't return in the same way. It became something else. Not paralysis but preparation. Not dread but awareness. The gate, the one that cracked the sky, hadn't been the first. And it likely wouldn't be the last. Somewhere, out there, other minds were making choices. Looking at their own reflections. Some may not have chosen to remember. Some may have erased too much. Some may be watching. But this world didn't flinch anymore. They studied the fracture lines left in the soil, the lingering energy that hummed at the edge of human perception. It wasn't harmful anymore. Just awake. Some said it was like the planet itself had opened its eyes for the first time. Or maybe it was humanity that had finally learned how to see. The military programs that had been frozen came back online, carefully, with oversight. Not to fight what had already passed, but to protect what might come next. Defenses were built not out of fear but readiness. If the stars sensed something again, this world would meet it not with blind fire, but with a voice of its own. The dreams that had haunted people after the gate, the flashes of other lives, other choices, started to fade. Not completely. Just enough. Like scars that stopped hurting but never vanished. Some called them echoes. Others called them gifts. A strange kind of memory that reminded people what it meant to have a second chance. And everywhere people talked to each other more. Not out of panic. Not out of survival. But out of something simpler. Understanding. Because everyone had seen something. Everyone had felt it. The pull of what could have been. The weight of choice. And now, walking forward, they did so with a little more patience. A little more care. The second moon didn't come back. It had served its purpose. The sky remained whole but different. On clear nights you could still see where the cracks had been. And people would stop and look, quiet, humbled but unafraid. There were no more first contacts. No grand alien arrival. No fleets in orbit. Just one story burned into memory. The story of how the world almost lost itself not to war, but to forgetting. Of how something not entirely alien but not quite human gave them the hardest gift of all, the chance to choose again. Historians debated for years what to call it. A war without weapons? A peace without rules? A message from beings beyond space? Or a reflection of human guilt turned into something real? In the end, it didn't matter. What mattered was that humanity stayed human. Imperfect. Fierce. Beautiful in ways machines couldn't understand and gods couldn't predict. They didn't become perfect. They didn't become enlightened. They just kept going. And somewhere, in the dark corners of the universe, maybe someone was watching. Maybe someone was listening. Maybe, just maybe, they smiled. Because for all the worlds that had been lost to silence, this one didn't forget. This one remembered who it was. And chose to live.